Back in my senior year of high school, I fell hard for James. It wasn't until I bombed my SATs that he tossed my pregnancy test results in my dad's face. "Mr. Carter, your perfect little girl's knocked up by me now. Congrats, you're about to be a grandpa," he sneered. "But I'm not sticking around to play house." Then he took off to study abroad, leaving me in a mess. Turns out, he blamed my dad for indirectly causing his first love's death, so he decided to drag me down as payback. My dad had a heart attack and died. My mom lost it, got into a car wreck, and ended up paralyzed from the waist down. And me? I went from college hopeful to an unwed teen mom, despised by everyone. 10 years later, I ran into James again. He dropped to his knees, full of regret, swearing he still loved me. I'd just finished helping Lily with her homework when Mike texted me. Short and sweet, 9 p.m., the lounge, dress nice but not too skimpy. Big meeting. I set my phone down, kissed my daughter's forehead, and gently tucked her in. 9-year-old Lily closed her eyes, her little hand gripping my sleeve, not wanting me to leave. When my sugar daddy gave an order, I had to jump. I slapped on some light makeup to cover my exhaustion. When I got to the lounge in downtown Chicago, I could hear voices spilling out. "Mike, you've got it made. Your girl's a stunner, heard she was a college grad too. Mr. Thompson, you're hyping her up too much. She's a high school dropout, never made it to college." "If she had, I couldn't afford her," Mike said with a mocking laugh, though you could hear the pride underneath. "She's got the looks, though. That's why I've kept her around for 8 years. She's a steal, cheap enough to keep a little firecracker like her." Mike loved the spotlight, especially when he could parade me around as his trophy. After 8 years as his mistress, I was numb to his showboating. I was about to push the door open, unfazed, when Mr. Thompson's tone sharpened. "Watch your mouth. Some guys brought family tonight. Sarah's from a good home, keep your trash talk under wraps so you don't freak her out." I stepped inside, and a low, icy voice cut through the air. "Sarah's not feeling great tonight, so no drinks for her. I'll toast you all instead." He looked up at me, and his words died mid-sentence. His hand froze with the glass halfway up. After 10 years, this was how James and I met again. Every eye in the room landed on me, some impressed, some leering, some disgusted. Mike's tie was a mess, so I played the sweet girlfriend, fixing it with a smile before settling next to him. James's shock faded fast into a distant coolness. Once he clocked why I was there, his stare turned openly mocking. A decade had turned him into a slick, suit-and-tie hotshot, with his legit fiancée, Sarah, on his arm. Me? I was the side chick to 48-year-old Mike, summoned and dismissed at his whim. "Babe, didn't I say 9? You're half an hour late. What, you think you're too good to keep these big shots waiting? Say sorry," Mike griped. I glanced around. Besides Sarah, there was another young woman, clearly a mistress too, perched next to Mr. Thompson. Our roles here were obvious. I flashed a winning smile, tossed out some clever apologies, and downed 3 drinks as punishment. "Mike, you're too soft on this one. She strolls in late and just drinks to smooth it over?" "She's clueless, but you're not," Mr. Thompson said, his eyes raking over me without shame. Mike had scratched his way up in this brutal city with no backup, and it showed. He was the small fish here. He paused, then nodded at me to pour drinks for the bosses. I got the message, charming them with sweet words as I filled their glasses, and apologized again. When I reached Mr. Thompson, his hand accidentally grazed my thigh. I flicked my eyes to Mike. Luckily, he didn't catch it, or I'd be the one paying for it, not Thompson. I sidestepped Thompson's creepy stare and moved to James. He'd seen the whole flirty mess and watched me with a chilly gaze, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. I slipped back to Mike's side, doting on him, practically feeding him every bite. Then Mike's wife walked in. She strode in wearing a designer suit, polished and radiating authority. Mike's wife, Linda. Her arrival flipped the mood in an instant. The guys swapped looks, barely hiding their amusement at the drama. Mike's face went stiff. I braced for Linda to go full soap opera, yelling, slapping, tearing into me. But she didn't. She didn't even glance my way, treating me like I was just part of the decor, not worth noticing. Linda sat down with poise, smiling politely as she chatted up the men. She handled herself like it was nothing, bossing Mike around effortlessly. "Honey, why were you just standing there? We've got to apologize to these gentlemen together. Today's on my husband. He insisted on taking my car to visit my folks yesterday, and it broke down without him noticing. Made me late." Mike snapped to it, agreeing fast and pouring drinks for everyone with a grin. Linda took the glass he handed her. So sorry about this. My man's a bit of a pushover, scared of me, you know. Hope you don't mind the laugh. She paused, then shifted gears. But when it comes to business, he's solid. Anything he can't handle for our company, you can come straight to me. She raised her glass and knocked back 3 full shots of whiskey without flinching. Linda, you're a force of nature. Mr. Thompson clapped first. With a wife like you, Mike's got it easy. Seriously, that kind of grit puts us guys to shame. Linda was sharp, impressive, even, and the men around her piled on the praise. I didn't feel a thing, not even a flicker of embarrassment. I was the mistress. I didn't get to feel anything. Linda barely spared me a sidelong glance, but I caught her message loud and clear. Who do you think you are? I'm hitting the restroom, Sarah said suddenly, standing and motioning for me to come along. I followed her out of the room without a word. In the bathroom, her voice bounced off the mirror. You're young, pretty, why waste yourself as someone's mistress? Making dirty money like this? I gave a bitter smile, appreciating her kindness. I've got no skills, no degree. This is the best I can do to survive. She sighed. That's no excuse to trash yourself. I studied James's fiancée. She was quiet, refined, every move screaming privilege. Someone like her could never get why I'd trade my dignity for 10 grand a month. How do you explain that? That I'm useless, too weak to sling takeout or haul boxes to cover my mom's insane medical bills? After the dinner wrapped up, it was just Mike, Linda, and me left in the room. That's when Linda dropped the mask, sneering as she slapped me hard across the face. You're nothing but a cheap tramp who smiles for men's scraps. How dare you show your face at a meeting this important, you parentless piece of trash. She screamed, hitting and kicking me, spitting out every filthy word she could think of. I wanted to tell her my dad was dead, my mom half paralyzed and barely alive, no one's left to teach me right from wrong. But I couldn't get a word out, just shielded my face and let her wail on me. Mike tried to step in, but Linda shut him down with one line. Defend her, and I'll divorce you right now. Mike froze, then made a half-hearted show of holding her back. Linda got more worked up, grabbing an ashtray and swinging it at my head. An arm shot out and stopped her. A calm voice cut in. This is a public place. Settle your grudges privately. I don't want this caught on camera, stirring up a mess that tanks our deal. James had come back, his face dark as he blocked Linda's swing. Mike shot James a grateful look, asked him to take me to a doctor, and hauled Linda off. In the car, we didn't say a word. James's face was stormy, eyes fixed ahead, silent. I sat in the back, noticing we weren't heading home, and finally spoke up. No hospital needed. Just drop me at the next corner, Mr. James. Rachel, I never pegged you for this low, he said suddenly, his voice like ice. Even if you didn't ace the SATs, you still got into a decent state school. You're really this desperate? Throwing yourself away? Didn't Mr. Carter raise you better? Does he know you're out here selling yourself? Or maybe he's cashing in on it too, living off his daughter's dirty money. Guess he's not the saintly teacher anymore after getting canned. His voice dripped with venom when he said Mr. Carter. If I told him my dad died 10 years ago because of him, would he laugh in triumph? Mr. James, I don't need a hospital. Please stop the car. He ignored me, piling on the taunts. What, too ashamed to tell a doctor the wife beat you up? You know it's humiliating. 8 years as a mistress, and you're still pretending to have some pride? I was drained, tuning him out, my mind on Lily. Mr. James, let me out. He smirked, a mix of anger and mockery. You didn't fight back when she hit you, but you're tough with me. I'm your sugar daddy's client. Maybe show me some of that flirty charm you put on at dinner. I nodded, seeing his point, and forced a smile. You're right, Mr. James. I know my place as a mistress. If the wife needs to vent, I let her swing. But I covered my face, no point in ruining it and tanking my next gig. He slammed the brakes, tires screeching as the car jerked to a stop on the roadside. He turned, staring me down like he wanted to devour me. Get out. Don't filth up my car. I stepped out without a flicker of emotion, doing as he said. I'm not some numb shell who doesn't feel anything anymore. It's just that 10 years of grinding to survive has left me too tired even to ripple with feelings. I'd rather spend that energy making a buck than wallowing. When I got home, the sight stopped my breath. Lily's tiny body was curled up on the floor, face purple, gasping for air, her little hand reaching uselessly toward the cabinet with her asthma inhaler. Panic clawed through me. Only my daughter could crack me open like this. I shook as I sprayed her medicine, sobbing loud once her breathing steadied. She hugged me tight, her small hand patting my back. Mommy, don't cry. I'm sorry. I'm such a burden. She comforted me like I was the kid, always so good, too good. After she fell back asleep, I stared at my wrecked reflection in the mirror and slapped myself twice. Linda's hits stung my skin, but these burned my soul. I'd been so caught up in that humiliating dinner that I'd left Lily's life-saving inhaler out of reach. I went back to her side, gazing at her peaceful face, and finally calmed down. If my dad hadn't dropped dead 10 years ago, if my mom hadn't lost her mind and crashed her car from the shock, Lily would be snuggled up with a doting grandma right now, eating fruit hand-fed by a grandpa who adored her. Instead, she's got a filthy mom and a grandma who lost her legs in that wreck, half-crazed and bedridden. When everything fell apart 10 years ago, Lily was 3 months old. I didn't have time to get an abortion. Dropping out and selling off our house to pay mom's bills made me forget I was even pregnant. By the time I noticed, my belly was too big to ignore. Taking care of my incontinent mom, I passed out from exhaustion more times than I can count, but the baby inside me hung on. The first time I felt her faint, stubborn heartbeat, I couldn't go through with getting rid of her. I was young, thinking life couldn't get worse. If it came to it, the three of us could just die together. My mom hated James, hated me, and hated the kid I had with him. She refused to see Lily, so I had to juggle caring for them separately, running myself ragged. When Lily was 2, the thought of ending it all got real. Mom's mental state tanked, she'd curse me out with the vilest words, blaming me for Dad's death, hitting me whenever I got close. She even tried to kill herself every chance she got. Worn to the bone, I brought her home, fed her and Lily milk laced with sleeping pills, and started burning charcoal to end it. Maybe God took pity. Lily woke up first in the smoke, stumbling to me, pressing my chest like she'd seen on TV, crying mommy until the neighbors came running. After that, no matter how brutal life got, I never dared think of giving up again. Lily and mom have to outlive me. To cover mom's thousands in monthly care and Lily's formula, I started working nights at a karaoke bar, pouring drinks for creeps. I lost count of how many times I debated just diving into the deep end. Hooking paid way more than serving. Then, at 20, I met Mike, 20 years older and the first decent break in my trainwreck life. He stopped me from getting passed around, saying I only had to be with him. He covered mom's nursing and medical bills, and I felt a weight lift off me. 8 years ago, he started with $3,000 a month, now it's 10. When I found out he was married, I tried to walk away. He showed me a video of his wife with some poolside boy toy, pulled me close, and said, "We're too tied up in business to divorce. She can't have kids anyway, we've both been playing our own games for years. Stick with me, and I won't let you down." When just staying alive felt like a pipe dream, pride and morals stopped mattering. So I stayed his mistress, no guilt. I'm not scared of karma. Mine started at 16 when I met James, and it's been carving me up ever since, like a leech I can't shake. My tragedy kicked off sophomore year when I fell for James at first sight. Back then, he always had this shadow, Emily, trailing him. Everyone at school assumed she was his girlfriend. He was the golden boy, after all. I was a star in my own right, proud and confident, so I buried my crush deep and watched from afar. Senior year, Emily transferred out, and they split. My grades never slipped from the top spot. I was sure I could ace the SATs and get into a top school. So when James started getting close, asking for study help, I was over the moon, falling hard into the romance he spun, thinking it was love. We had a secret, wild fling nobody knew about. Then, right before the SATs, I found out I was pregnant. Panicked, I tanked the test, my score only good enough for a mid-tier state school. The night before, he'd held me, promising a post-graduation trip and marriage. The next day, he slammed my pregnancy test and SAT results in my dad's face. "Mr. Carter, your golden girl's pregnant by me now. Congrats on the grandpa gig." He didn't leave an inch of mercy, spilling the truth and flying out that same day. That's when I realized his love was just revenge, a sick joke. My dad had been James and Emily's senior year homeroom teacher. Emily was a straight-A kid too, but in that final stretch, she started showing up late, skipping out early, her grades crashing. Dad blamed it on her dating James, said it ruined the class vibe. For a whole week, he made them stand in front of the entire school at morning assembly, calling them out. The humiliation and pressure broke Emily. She got depressed and took her own life. The school hushed it up, paid off her guardian, and claimed she'd transferred. James pinned all his rage on my dad. In his hate-filled rant, we learned Emily's parents were long gone. She'd been stuck with an uncle who didn't want her. Her aunt made her life hell, and her uncle, a drunk gambler, beat her and nearly forced her to drop out and sell herself. Those days she was late or absent? That was her at her lowest. James was her only lifeline. But that public shaming was the final straw. Now I've knocked up your daughter, Mr. High and Mighty Teacher. Don't forget to discipline her good. Take your precious girl somewhere quiet for an abortion. Can't have Mr. Carter's reputation bending, right? If word gets out your daughter's a teen mom, you'll never rest in peace. That night, my dad hit me for the first time, then hugged me, sobbing, an old man on the verge of retirement begging my forgiveness. I ruined you, kid. Then he had a heart attack, and they couldn't save him. My mom, dazed and broken, crashed her car and lost her legs to survive. Now I'm a figurehead manager at a small clothing store James invested in. Business is slow, but I don't handle stock, the staff does, and I just ring up sales. It's easy hours, letting me swing by mom's psych ward or pick Lily up from school whenever. For some reason, James started popping up all the time, making excuses to be around. He'd park his flashy car outside the store and sit there half the day. Mike caught on quick and called me when I was almost home, grilling me. He's possessive as hell, and I didn't want him freaking out, so I fed him some line about keeping James at arm's length. Once I calmed Mike down and hung up, I saw James's car parked right outside my place. He was leaning against it, clearly having overheard everything. His face darkened as he yanked me into the car, slamming the door shut. Straight to the point, he said. I'll take care of you. Dump Mike. I almost laughed, shooting him a baffled look. Mr. James, respect yourself. I'm not leaving Mike, pretend I didn't hear that. He scoffed. You're already selling yourself, why play the loyal act? Who you sell to doesn't matter. You're really sticking with that married geezer over me? I didn't bother responding, reaching for the door, but he locked it like a lunatic, staring at me with red-rimmed eyes. I knew that look, he was pissed. But why should I care about his feelings now? Mr. James, my place, my job, even my food, it's all thanks to Mike. He pulled me out when I had nothing. I owe him. James smirked, tapping the steering wheel impatiently. I can give you all that and more, better than he ever could. I was done playing nice. James, didn't you hate me? Hate me enough to ruin me? I met his gaze, voice flat. It's been 10 years. You still won't let me go, got some new way to torture me lined up? We dated once, he said, his face unreadable, cutting me off fast. I don't want a girl I used to mess with slumming it under some guy so beneath me. Rachel, you're embarrassing me. His tone was like he was doing me a favor. 10 years, and I've lost count of how many times I've cursed myself for ever liking him. Today, that disgust hit a peak, I wanted to slap myself for falling for James. I cut off his ego trip, deadpan. James, Mr. James, I hope you stay out of my life from now on. Mike's already suspicious. I really don't want you screwing things up between me and him. His face stiffened, but he covered it quick. Rachel, don't flatter yourself. Who are you acting all high and mighty for? You're just a dime a dozen mistress now. Who you sleep with doesn't change that. I'm young, fit, and loaded. What, scared you can't keep up? Or do you just have a thing for guys old enough to be your dad? I couldn't even muster a response, it was too ridiculous. James, you're getting married. Mike says your fiancé's family has pull. He shrugged like it was nothing. So what? You're a mistress, since when do you care about wives? Your fiancé's got power and connections, not like Mike's wife. I laid it out flat. Mike's wife might just slap me around, but if Sarah's parents find out about me, they'll bury me. His expression flickered, but the anger in his eyes only deepened. I'm not Mike, that coward who hooks up but can't back it up. I let out a dry laugh, staring at him in disbelief. Mr. James, you trying to prove something to me? He choked on that, then started running his mouth again. When he brought up my dad, though, my numb calm finally cracked. James, since you're so hung up on my dad, why don't you go ask him for payback in heaven? He froze. What's that supposed to mean? I wanted to scream, but it came out as a tired sigh. My dad died 10 years ago, paying for your girlfriend's life with his. You trashed my life too. Without you, I'd never have met Mike. You're the one who tied us together. So me being your mistress? Never happening. I just want you gone. Panic flashed across his face, he didn't believe it, fumbling for his phone to check. The air between us hit rock bottom when Mike tapped on my window. James grudgingly unlocked the door. I stepped out, cool as ever, explaining to Mike. Mike couldn't afford to piss off a business partner, so he forced a smile despite his sour mood. He kept his head low while James sat in the driver's seat, silent and fuming. Mike grabbed my wrist hard, dragging me home. I could feel his rage, and James's eyes burning into my back as I walked away. Inside, Mike flung me onto the couch, yelling, "You trying to climb into James's bed? Got a taste for young and rich now?" I shook my head. He pressed closer. "He's been hovering around you lately. A guy like him wouldn't stoop to you, right? That pretty little face of yours, always fishing for attention. Rachel, you're a used-up nobody. Cross me, and I'll end you. Mike's done a lot for me over the years, I'd be sunk without him. He's not a bad guy, just possessive and mouthy when he's mad. Usually, I can calm him down with some soft words and patience. But James showing up must have rattled him bad. My usual tricks didn't work, and his temper flared hotter. Lily ran out of her room, clinging to Mike's leg, crying, "Uncle Mike, don't hit Mommy." She didn't get it. Mike, who'd always been good to her, who she'd once seen as a dad, turning on me like this. Mike yanked her off, hauled her by the arm, and locked her in her room. Then, through that thin door, he ripped at my clothes. "Let me go, Lily's right there. Rachel, you're alive because of me. Everything you've got, food, clothes, anything, I gave you. And you're chasing other guys? Once a tramp, always itching to jump into someone else's bed. James? You think you're in his league?" He raised his hand to slap me a few times but stopped short. Lily's sobs echoed through the door. I begged him to stop, not in front of her. He spat, saying she should know what her mom really is, then made a show of it, louder on purpose. I stopped fighting, just bit my lip till it bled. I couldn't push back. If I did, Mom's as good as dead. When he finished, Mike cooled off, saw my blank stare, and realized he'd gone too far. He wouldn't meet my eyes, guilt flickering as he looked away. Then he sent me 20 grand and bolted like a coward. I stared at the sorry money. 2 months of Mom's hospital bills. What could I do with that time? For the first time in years, I thought about leaving Mike. He could hurt me all he wanted, but not Lily. I pulled myself together and unlocked Lily's door. Her right toenail was flipped up, bleeding from kicking the door in a panic. She was curled up, pale and wheezing, her asthma triggered by the scare. I shoved down my fear, grabbed her inhaler from her backpack, and rushed her to the hospital. At the complex entrance, I spotted James, still there. His car was tucked away, and he stood beside it, looking conflicted. He saw me sprint out with Lily and froze, then cautiously approached. After a beat, I got in his car again. At the ER, while they bandaged Lily's foot, James stayed close, his eyes locked on her, disbelief sinking in. She looked too much like him. Daughter takes after dad. I told him Lily was his. It was the first time I saw regret on his face. Mike must have been too ashamed to face me. He ghosted. 3 days later, James started showing up nonstop. He swapped Lily's meds for fancy imported stuff, filled our place with designer clothes and school supplies we'd never dreamed of. He acted like the past didn't exist, picking Lily up from school every day, giving me time to visit Mom. Lily loved this uncle who'd popped up out of nowhere. Her classmates were jealous, saying her mom was gorgeous and her dad was cool. James beamed, scooping her up for a forehead kiss, then bought imported snacks for all the kids. Amid their cheers, Lily blushed and grinned, a happiness she never had with Mike. He'd show up with groceries, cooking 3 meals a day like it was normal. Even if I ignored him, he'd ramble on to himself, chattering away. Lily knew I didn't like him, so she'd freeze him out too when we were all together. Only when he looked too pathetic would she sneak a word, checking my reaction first. I didn't mind him being good to Lily. He'd probably dug up everything about the last 10 years by now. He owed her this, and I just had to stomach him long enough to milk his guilt for her future. Still, tossing out the fancy meals he made for Mom felt like a waste. This weird, almost married routine lasted 2 weeks. Then James took me to a swanky villa that screamed money. He showed me around, eyes soft but nervous, and asked, "Like it? Top-notch hospital and school nearby." His voice had a shaky edge. "It's perfect for Lily. If you're good with it, I'll put the deed in your name today." I looked at him calmly. "James, you're about to get married. Planning to stash me away in your love nest?" He rushed to explain. "I called off the engagement with Sarah. I'm free now. Lily's my daughter, this is the least I can do." The high-rise hospital and the private school 10 minutes away tempted me. But I couldn't gamble Lily's stability. I turned him down flat, knowing him, pushing him away would max out his guilt. Sure enough, after some back and forth, he dropped to his knees, the thud echoing in the empty house. Tears streamed down his face as he looked up, voice hoarse with remorse. "Rachel, I know everything now. No apology can undo what I did to you. All I want is to give you everything I've got to make it right. I'll handle your dad's funeral properly, let him rest easy. Your mom's current hospital's no good. If you're okay with it, I'll move her to the best place overseas for top treatment." He was a mess, sobbing. "I love you, Rachel. 10 years ago, my feelings weren't fake. Emily and I were never a thing. She was just a kid I helped once. She had a rough life and clung to me after I stepped in. I let her stick around out of pity. You're the only one I've ever loved." I laughed inside, seeing him for what he was. Not kind, not some saint spreading love, just a guy who fell for whoever was the most broken, lost in his own fairy tale. "I was young and reckless, and I hurt your whole family. Rachel, I ran abroad because I realized I loved you. These 10 years, hurting you's kept me from living right." I watched him quietly, this man who'd once thrilled me, then crushed me. "Young and reckless excuses you ditching me? All the damage you did to my family isn't fixed by cooking a few meals or being nice to Lily. James, ask yourself, Emily's death, was that really my dad's fault? You ran from her, from me, from responsibility. That's why my family's a wreck." I watched him slap himself, groveling at my feet in agony, and felt nothing. I just wanted my dad back, my mom whole, and to have never met James. My voice grew colder. "It's too late for this. Lily's your kid, you owe her. But your money for mom's care, your so-called amends for dad? I won't touch it. Because my dad's watching from above. I've got no pride left, but he still does." I turned to leave. He croaked behind me, desperate. "I'm sorry, give me one chance, please. I've got cancer." When I heard James was sick, I'll admit it, I was glad. He said 10 years of smoking, drinking, and wrecking himself had caught up. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, body falling apart under the guilt. He found out it was late-stage stomach cancer during Lily's DNA test. While I was plotting my next move, trouble hit. Word got out at Lily's school that I was a married man's mistress. Rumors flew, I was with a broke sugar daddy and chasing another hitched guy. When I picked Lily up, her best friend shoved her down, yanking her hair, calling her a horse kid, dirty. Rage blinded me. I pushed the ringleader off and pulled Lily close, dialing 911. The kid's mom saw me shove her daughter and went feral, hurling a bag of eggs at me. The stench dripped down my face and hair, sticky and vile. She screamed, rallying the crowd, spewing filth. "You shameless slut. Home-wrecking tramp. Spreading your legs for cash, your kid's just as rotten. I'll record this and blast it online, let the internet tear you apart." She whipped out her phone. Lily broke free and threw her backpack at her. The woman stumbled, swinging at Lily. I tackled her, scrapping like mad, grabbing a brick to smash her head. James appeared, face thunderous, stopping me. He held his temper, eyes dangerous, shoved her down, and warned me he was recording, "Don't do anything stupid." He shielded me and Lily, announcing to the crowd he was her real dad. Said he was the one hounding us, and anyone spreading lies would face a lawsuit. Cops hauled us off. Lily buried herself in James's arms, sobbing harder than I'd ever heard, breaking my heart. "Mommy's the best, why do they hurt her? Uncle James, will you hurt her too?" James held her, trembling, unable to answer. His knuckles whitened on the wheel, nails digging into his palm. I don't know how he did it, but his fancy lawyers turned the fight into her fault, harassment and defamation. She paid 30 grand, pocket change for him, but maybe everything for her family. She showed up with her kid to apologize, and I dropped the case once Lily forgave them. Their damage to me? I didn't care. Mistresses are fair game for hate. James transferred Lily to that ritzy private school by the villa. The next few days were a circus, people kept coming. First was Mike. He looked rough, eyes bloodshot, his usual swagger gone. Said business took a hit, not bankrupt, but bad. After 8 years, I felt something real for him. He mumbled an apology for before. Then, serious, said he had $1 million or so left. If he ditched everything and divorced, would I stay, give him a kid? His wife can't have kids, he'd always wanted one. He joked about it with me but never pushed, not wanting a bastard child. This time, he meant it. I looked at him, emotions tangled. I spilled everything, James, Lily's origins, all of it. Thanked him for years of help, said I didn't blame him. And told him we were done. He knew James was likely screwing him over. After half a pack of smokes, weighing it all, he agreed to split. Looking up, eyes red, he said, "I hope you make it, kid. If that bastard James messes with you again, call me, I'll still have your back." I said goodbye to Mike, to 8 years of shame. Next was Linda, Mike's wife. Still all high class, decked in designer gear, flawless makeup. She cut to it, her and Mike were a sham marriage. She'd lashed out at me because her boy toy scammed her cash, dumped her, and moved on to another mistress. She was tired of the game, wanted to fix things with Mike, knew he'd pitched having a kid with me, begged me to let him go. It was laughable, pathetic. Seeing the wife grovel to the mistress, I felt a rare wave of self-loathing. I slapped myself in front of her, said I didn't hold it against her. Sham or not, I was the other woman, fact. Admitted I was grateful she never sued me for their joint cash. She went quiet, then said she'd looked into my past, thought I'd had it rough, said Mike spent less on me than she did on her guy's condo. Hoped I'd live clean from now on. I'd heard that line a million times in 10 years. People couldn't get why a girl once set for the top schools ended up like this. They said I didn't try hard enough, just wanted easy money. With my smarts, I could have done better. But they don't know what it's like, 18, world crashing down, too broken to even die. How do you claw out of that like some storybook hero? I swore to Linda I'd never contact Mike again and left. That night, Sarah called. The school thing wasn't me. Didn't know Lily was yours and James's. Sorry, my parents might have done it. No harm to family, I'm apologizing for them. Anything you need, just ask. Her voice was still poised, kind. Like our first meeting, I could feel her genuine warmth toward women. Her parents loved her right, she turned out good, real good. If my folks were still here, if I'd made it to a top college, maybe I'd be that good too. She ended with, I liked James, but I'm too good for him. It felt like everything settled. Mom moved to the city's best hospital, getting top care. A round-the-clock nurse stabilized her, she was visibly calmer. James turned into a jobless drifter, orbiting me and Lily. It was almost rom-com territory, he pulled every cheesy CEO chases wife move. He offered me the best of everything with this desperate sincerity. If I frowned, he'd panic, apologizing like I'd reject his redemption. I know I deserve hell, not your forgiveness. I don't have long, soon I won't be able to carry Lily up hills or watch her grow. I just want to make up for what I owe you both in my last days. He pulled out a velvet box, knelt, hands shaking as he opened it. I know I don't deserve it, but will you marry me? My will set, everything goes to you and Lily when I'm gone. His voice broke. I looked at him, unmoved. I said yes, not for love, but for Lily's future. I wanted my daughter to look people in the eye, head high, and say she's not a bastard. Just a girl whose dad died. James and I had a simple wedding, his health couldn't handle more. His parents watched their once shining son, now frail and pale, tears streaming down their faces. They clung to Lily's hand like she was all they had left. They cried the hardest at the ceremony. After, we didn't touch each other, his body couldn't anymore. We honeymooned and lived like any sweet couple. When pain drove him to want to bash his head in, I'd stop him gently. Held him, said, if you die, what'll me and Lily do? You've got to hang on. I was terrified, if I didn't prop him up, he'd off himself. That'd be too easy for him. 6 months in, James thought my forgiveness and this last taste of happiness meant he could die content. My constant pep talks worked, he fought through chemo, forcing himself to eat despite the agony. Then his overseas medical team dropped a bomb, he might actually beat it. Before I could process that bad news, worse came. Mom found out. You can't hide forever, word of me marrying James reached her. The hospital called, she'd tried swallowing needles to kill herself. I raced there. Nurses struggled to pin down her half-body. She was wild, eyes bloodshot, cursing me with every vile word she knew. You married him? He killed your father. You shameless curse. Why don't you die? You should be dead. She threw anything she could grab, smashing it against my head. Blood ran into my eyes as I helped hold her for the sedative. When she came to, seeing me slumped beside her, exhausted, she brushed my wound with rough fingers. Baby, I'm sorry. I've failed you all this time. I don't hate you. I hate myself, dragging you down so long. You've suffered so much, I know it all. She covered her mouth, crying softly, scared to wake me, though she saw my arms soaked with tears. I love you, so please, let me go. Hurting you, my only girl, out of control, it's worse than death. I knelt by her bed, banging my head on the floor. I'd been selfish, blind to her despair. Begging her not to leave me, not to abandon me. I thought back to before I turned 18. Even as an adult, Mom would buy me the best sandalwood combs, brushing my hair herself. Gotta keep my pretty girl's locks perfect, she'd say. I'd tease her for getting old lady stuff, so she'd stay up nights with her glasses on, teaching herself to draw. She'd paint trendy cartoon cats on the comb, stroke by stroke. That goofy thing stayed with me even after I chopped my hair short. Mom was gentle, smart, the glue of our home. Dad was all about grades. I suffered for it growing up. Once, studying late, she brought warm milk, sneaking some to Dad too. After he passed out, she'd grin, proud and worried. "Go sleep, baby. Your dad's been too hard on you, slimmed you down to nothing." I slipped him a little something. Rest. Every season, my closet had new clothes. Every day, my favorite dish hit the table. How could I let a mom like that go? I didn't want to be motherless. "Mom, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." I sobbed, lost for words to earn her forgiveness. I've never stopped hating James, not for a second. Especially when I heard he might survive, that flimsy "let bygones be bygones" lie I'd fed myself ripped apart. When the Empresses in the Palace was big, I couldn't relate to "every touch from you disgusts me." After seeing James again, that line roared in my head 100 times stronger than any TV drama. So when he, frail but ecstatic, swore he'd hold on to stay with me and watch Lily grow, I sneered, yanking my hand from his. Wiped it over and over with a sanitizing wipe. I leaned close, hissing the nastiest curse I could muster. "Don't worry, once you're dead, I'll remarry fast, have Lily call someone else dad. I'll pray at the temple every day, begging for you to rot in hell. This life, the next, 10 lifetimes, I never want to see you again." Guess God heard me. "My family's decade of pain traded for your cancer. Want my forgiveness? Want redemption? Die." His body locked up. Shock hit his eyes first, then splintered into raw, shredded pain. He reached for me. I dodged like he was poison. His throat seized, no sound, just trembling lips and tears. He closed his eyes slow, sealing away the desperation and pleas. He finally got it. I'd never forgiven him. The next day, James was gone. They say he ripped off his oxygen mask in the dead of night, using his last strength. I faked my way through his funeral, then, before his ashes cooled, changed Lily's last name back to Carter. Yanked myself out of the Wilson family registry too. I didn't care what his parents thought. Lily didn't need grandparents who couldn't raise a decent son. So what if I changed her name? They could try for another kid, or all the Wilson fortune would still end up Lily's. My girl just needed their money, not their name. When Mom heard he was dead, her mental state miraculously leveled out. She went back to 3 dishes and soup, a bowl of rice, healthy, steady. No more suicide attempts, just pills to keep her calm. I got her custom prosthetics. On good days, she'd ask me to help her into her favorite old dress. She started warming to Lily, painting for her like she did my combs, clumsy but sweet. Lily's so good, she barely knows these grandparents who'd spoil her rotten but keeps her distance. Instead, she cuddles up to her broken grandma, patiently watching her draw. I could finally breathe. I studied hard, enrolled in community college, then prepped for grad school. It's what Dad wanted. I'd make it happen. When I get that master's degree, pushing Mom's wheelchair into the sunrise. That's my real rebirth.